Hello and welcome back to another episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby Babb. Today I am delighted to welcome onto the show Ollie Cadman, the Chief Product Officer of Eventus. Ollie, how are you?
Toby, hi, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Really good, thanks, really good. Listen, welcome back onto the show, albeit in different guise this time out. Eventus, we've spoken to numerous times on FinTech Focus TV in the past. Travis has done an incredible job about talking about the business and where everything's headed, and loads of exciting stuff in the past. Handed the baton over to you to talk about it in Europe and beyond. So, look, but we've got loads and loads we want to talk about today. Before we get into it all, there'll be people here who haven't maybe heard of Eventus beforehand. They've been hiding behind a rock. Tell us a little bit about you and Eventus, if you would.
Yeah, well, firstly, thanks for having me. Nice to be here. Big shoes to fill with Travis, but I'll do my best. So, look, Eventus, we're a leading provider of trade surveillance and risk solutions. Across the full spectrum of financial risk, but specifically, focused on trade surveillance, as we mentioned, AML, transaction monitoring, and risk monitoring. We're a truly global company. Been around for about 5 to 6 years now. Spun out of RGM Advisors. The story goes that Travis, who was the chief compliance officer there, was looking across the marketplace for a solution and just couldn't find one that suited his needs, particularly around the real-time nature, the volume and capacity, and the ability to really customize and dynamically update the platform. So they built one and they spun it out, and 5 to 6 years later, here we are. I joined just over 6 months ago, running product globally, so focusing specifically on how we align with clients in terms of their needs, their pain points, their objectives, and how we feed that into a roadmap and a set of products and features that deliver on those objectives. Previously was a company called Vela for about 4.5 years, where I did something similar, and have always been in sort of the trading software front office space. Including a couple of exchanges, London Stock Exchange, ICE, JP Morgan, etc. So slightly different angle, but similar use case and concepts.
I said to Travis last time, I thought it was an excellent sort of addition to the team, not blowing too much smoke your way, but it seems like a really good step further forward for you, and the company itself has just done some incredible things. We were talking before we came on air about a video that I remembered seeing. I had to take a video on my phone of it from my LinkedIn because I just thought it was so impressive. It was, I've been speaking to Travis for a year or so, looking at the evolution of the business, but actually just to see it there in black and white about what was achieved over 2021 was incredible, both in terms of the investment, in terms of the growth, in terms of numbers, the growth in terms of headcount, the clients that were won. It seems like it's just been an incredible journey over the last 12 months, and we both spoke about it. Look, to carry that on into 2022 was going to be difficult, but Q1 seems to have been pretty impressive as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 2021 for many reasons was probably quite a transformative year, right? If you look at some of the significant logos and wins. Obviously, we completed our Series B $30 million funding, and then the investment and expansion that's brought across all areas of the business. From a sales and account management perspective, from a product and engineering perspective, it really allows us to continue that scaled, structured, well-managed growth that's 100% focused on delivering for our clients. And we finished the year very, very strong. And I think when you finish in that position, you're always a little bit nervous about, can you continue that trajectory? And we continue to. I think as we remain very laser focused on that client delivery, on our strategic objectives, it continues to resonate with our clients and the wider marketplace. And that's a great position to be in. And as much as I'd love to take credit for a lot of that, obviously, given when I joined, I'm really here just to help keep that momentum go forwards with new products, new investments, and new offerings.
You represent a sort of really exciting sort of scale of growth from a business that was originally based out of Texas into a sort of significant launch into Europe as well. I know you've got a global role in there, but that European opportunity is something there which I know a lot of the investment was pointed towards. It's a great market opportunity for Eventus. Talk to us about that growth in Europe.
I think me joining the company coincided with obviously the Series B funding and the trigger for that investment at a regional level to build out those core autonomous regional teams across all of our different disciplines. So we did invest significantly in terms of our regulatory affairs team. These are guys that have sat in the seats of our customers. They're either chief compliance officers, head of trade surveillance analysts, etc. They've done the job. And so they really understand the challenges, etc. And having those on the ground in the region with that regional expertise, as well as backed by that global team, I think is very important. And then similarly, our client success, account management, product management, sales, etc. Having that core kind of Eventus people infrastructure in the region on the ground, I think is very important. And we've just rounded that out quite nicely. We just put an announcement out a couple of weeks ago that we hired Nick Wallace as our regional sales head for the region. He joins us from NASDAQ, where heavily involved on the smart side. So he brings he's a great addition to the team and brings even more of that regional and global kind of knowledge and expertise to the team. So very excited to have him join.
It's an exciting time, isn't it, when you look at that sort of thing? And as you spoke beforehand, this isn't just about bringing in bodies. It's about bringing in people there who make a real difference. And you started off by talking about Travis having been frustrated trying to find a solution when he was incumbent, which I think is such a common sort of theme of a founder's dilemma to sort of sit there and be frustrated with with the state of the industry and actually say, right, look, this is something which is needed. Let's go out and create that sort of opportunity, and then see it sort of snowball over the last few years as it has must be incredibly satisfying for it. But again, you're talking about attracting people in there into the business who are recognizing the scale and scope and potential of what and where Eventus sits. Do you think that continues? I mean, look, this is an enormous marketplace. We see huge scale in it. As you say, this is part of the journey at the moment. There's been significant funding behind that as well. This is an area where I think my view is it only continues to expand and grow, and the significance of it as trust becomes further and further embedded into the capital markets ecosystem, that it just brings even more scale and scope for what you guys are doing with the business right now, right?
That's the plan. I hope you're right. I'm glad you agree. But no, absolutely. I think, yes, this is a space where, there continues to be focus, investment, and it's continually changing. We're going through a very interesting time at the moment on the digital assets piece. We are probably the leading provider. In fact, we are the leading provider of trade surveillance in digital assets. We have some of the largest platforms and providers out there, including FTX, Coinbase, etc. We are seeing it's an interesting time there as we're starting to see more clarity on the regulatory approach that the different countries, etc., are taking, and the frameworks that they're looking to adopt, which unsurprisingly is something we've spoken about for a while. They're taking from traditional finance into that space, and we expect to see more convergence there in terms of those frameworks over time. So one of the things we always talk about with Eventus and Validus, which is the actual platform, is that element of future proofing, right? You're not just buying something that you get now, you're buying something that's going to give you that ability to adapt and change and react to future regulatory changes and frameworks, etc., that you may not be able to explicitly predict now, but you can ensure that from a technology and from a compliance program and from a provider perspective, that you've got all of the right building blocks in place to react quickly and be responsive to those changes and be able to focus on the core parts of your business that matter.
I think one of the interesting things alongside all of that the natural scale of what you're talking about has been, I remember it was right at the heart of the pandemic when when I was first speaking to Travis. He was talking about this growth of a business there where people hadn't met. You were talking about people all over the world, all over the country at that sort of stage. it was you know, a remote first strategy that seems to have, you know, continued. And I find that fascinating, from a company of, you know, where it started as a dozen odd people to where it is now. You know, and I know headcount's significantly north of those numbers. Maybe you can give us a little bit of a view of where that is right now. But it must be really, really interesting to see how that sort of, you know, and culture, I think, is very much something that's been got right at Eventus over the years. Tell us a little bit about that, how that continues. Is that still very much the case of a remote first world as it continues to expand over it? And how are you managing that sort of communication, that sort of culture and that sort of growth? I know you were out in the States yesterday meeting a lot of people for the very first time, and there was a lot of the team in there who were meeting for the very first time. How's that been? Because that must be quite, you know, you've talked about your track record in the past. You talked about the companies you work for. That's not been, you know, a massively remote world up until, you know, very recent times. Talk to us about all of that and how that works in a scaling, growing company.
It is definitely different. So we are still, you know, we are still remote first. So, you know, that's why we talk about ourselves as being a global company, right? We have employees in, you know, 10 different countries. I think we're in more than 12 different states in the US, you know, and that creates a lot of opportunity in terms of being able to attract that talent from wherever in the world is appropriate, right? We don't have to limit our pools. You know, I think particularly with, you know, post-COVID, etc., that's a key part of what a lot of people are looking for in terms of their sort of go forward job strategy, right? And employment strategy is having that flexibility, knowing that you can effectively work from anywhere and in a way that suits you. But you're right. I mean, we started 2021 with 34 employees. We've just tipped over the 100 mark. So, you know, that's a significant growth, and great and very exciting. But it is important that we continue to invest in all of the right, I think if Travis were on, he'd call it our people infrastructure, so that we've got all of those key tools and structures in place to onboard people effectively, to make sure that they know what success looks like for them, to communicate very clearly across the organization and make sure we're giving that context to people so they know how to be successful in their role. One of the things that really attracted me to Eventus was the culture. You know, just speaking to Travis and the rest of the team, you know, it really does have a very transparent, flat, think like an owner, make decisions as close to the problem as possible culture that really resonated well with me. But it's important that we maintain that whilst growing, and it becomes very easy and tempting to just throw lots of layers of process at everything to keep everything in check. But I think if you bring on the right people, give them the right context, and then ensure you have the right tools. We do invest a lot in terms of our tools, particularly collaborative tools, and, you know, Slack and all the different ways people can interact with each other. And of course, as we build our teams in the region, give them the freedom to meet. Just because we're a remote first company doesn't mean we're saying people can't meet up. Actually, we've just taken a WeWork space in London because a number of the guys are going into the office, you know, particularly sales, you know, client facing guys are going into the office a few days a week and would like to have a base. That's great. You know, we want people to meet. You just mentioned it. I was in New York last week. You know, we had a big kind of East Coast get together of all of the people that work that side of the pond, and, you know, for a number of them meeting for the first time face to face, which is great and very exciting. But it's just having those mechanics and those different levers. I think, you know, we're not saying people can't meet, but we give them the tools and the context to be able to be successful in their role wherever they choose to work and however they choose to interact with the rest of the organization, whilst ensuring we meet at least that sort of minimum level of, well, actually, whilst we over communicate. I would say one of the things we do is probably over communicate as an organization to make sure that everyone has all of the context that they can. But I would also say it's never done, right? I think that's why we have invested a lot in, you know, we brought on Layson as our VP of people, and she's brought on a good team behind her so that we can have all of the sort of learning and development, touch points, onboarding, buddy systems, etc., to make everyone successful. I always say, you know, I've had enough jobs. I know what an onboarding looks like at a firm. You know, I've done it enough times that, you know, whether it's remote or not. But I do think if you know, if you're coming out of college now and having being onboarded to your first role completely remotely, you haven't got that person sat next to you that you can, you know, ask the silly questions of. I remember my first day at the London Stock Exchange, I didn't realise you had to log into the phone. Like I've never used a phone where you had to log in before. I just thought people would call me, so I had to sort of just point. It's those little things that maybe people don't feel as confident, and making sure that we have that sort of environment for them to ask those types of questions and get used to those types of things, I think is very important.
Yeah, it's an amazing learning curve, isn't it? With all those the little things you don't think about, like that, that phone logging. Talk to me about it from your experience. I mean, like you say, you've had. It's not your first rodeo of starting having onboarding process, but it's interesting coming in at that C-level sort of environment. You're there. You come in a in a significant role. You've got 100 people there in an organisation to try and get around and get to know, and culture. I'm really fascinated about that. Look, it's culture there that encourage you to join the business. That's not an easy thing to get right in those sort of scenarios, other than with the sort of the commitment that I think that's been shown from Travis and the team to allow that to happen. Talk to me about your experience and how that was and how it stood out.
It was very easy, actually. And I remember I had a conversation with Travis before I joined, and he was very honest with me about no firm's perfect, right? Very honest with me about where we were and what the challenges were versus what the strengths were, etc. And I remember he asked me sort of 3 weeks into the job, was that an accurate depiction? Did I miss anything? There's this real integrity and honesty here, that we are not trying to boil the ocean. We are not trying to oversell our capabilities, but if we say we can do something, we can do it, and we will do it. And if you make a commitment to do something, you'll get it done. And that translates into everything. That translates into what we do internally, but it translates obviously very keenly to what we do with our clients. If we commit to getting something done, we'll get it done. And I think that's really helped in terms of the growth, because it really helps in terms of that word of mouth and just that reputation as a provider that will do what it says it will do. And so for me, that onboarding experience was really quite straightforward. Genuinely, everyone was very happy and wanted to help, and really just wanted to make sure we're in a good space, because having someone in a good space only helps them. And I think one of the things you do see historically when you're scaling up in these types of firms is people have to go from being a jack of all trades to a little bit more of a specialist, and sometimes that's hard for people to sort of make that adjustment. But everyone really, Travis and the team have done a great job of building a company where everyone just really wants to succeed, and everyone just wants it to be successful. And that makes a big difference, I think, in terms of just the day-to-day interactions across teams, etc.
It's funny, I was listening to a podcast walking into work this morning, just talking about exactly that. The sort of, actually sometimes being selfless for the team is the most selfish way to do it, because it allows you to build that success together. And I think that's exactly what you've just been talking about there. It's recognizing that actually, whilst you've got your own agenda and you want to push your career further forward, that's going to happen by having a successful team and making sure everyone else is successful around you. And that's a key part, I think, to integration and onboarding in a business where you've got people there who do want to make those newer people as integrated and as successful as possible, as quickly as they possibly can. I'd love to hear that. I think it's really good stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I think Joe Schifano, our sort of global head of regulatory affairs, always puts it well. Hire people that know things you don't. Don't be afraid to admit you don't know things, because none of us know everything, and recognize those gaps. And that's where you bring in people that's how you're successful, because you bring people in that can fill those gaps and have the knowledge that you just don't have. And if you pretend that you do, you're just not going to be successful in your role, and you're not going to be successful for the company. So.
I remember speaking to Travis, back end of last year, talking about having you on board and looking at the sort of importance of product, and I think I might even have spoken to you about this before. I think there's never been a stage over the last 18 months where I think product has been quite as important as it has been, and it seems to have risen in terms of significance as a role itself. That product roadmap and in the scale and scope of Eventus is going to be really important. Talk to us about what that looks like. Talk to us about the growth of products within the business. We know it's going strength to strength in terms of the heads and the brilliant people you're bringing on board. But what does that mean for the product? What have you got planned? What's in store?
Yeah, no, definitely, and I completely agree. By the way, I think it's particularly with the sort of enterprise SaaS growth. Product means standardized, repeatable deliveries, and everyone wins. And we've been spending some time thinking about how we continue to be product led by our clients in terms of the organization. And there's really kind of three key themes, I think, that fall into that based on the feedback that we've got from clients and where we're seeing, the most interest and demand. And that's really looking at sort of how we expand our analysis and our insights and our visualization. So how do we provide more insights using the data that we have, whether that be looking over longer periods of time. So rather than just looking at, trade surveillance often works on a T+1 basis, rather than just looking at yesterday, how does yesterday's behavior differ from last week or, last month or last quarter, and seeing some of those anomalies, how does the shift in trading change over time, or where does that start to become interesting? And then how do we build better data points and visualizations on those pieces to be able to see those trends over time and to be able to, as quickly as possible, conduct your investigation and understand if there's something there or move on to the next. And we've done quite a bit there in terms of, we've just redone our insider dealing suite. We've just brought on our first clients to sort of market depth order book replay, which is a whole new kind of visualization, obviously being able to look into the depth of the book, etc. And as I say, we'll continue to build out those behavioral, statistical kind of insights and the visualizations that support them. And then the second part really is holistic surveillance. So looking across the spectrum of different instrument types and contracts and their relationships, and how does that impact what you're surveilling and what you're doing. So, obviously the underlying on a futures contract or related series, etc. So that again, you have that holistic view across the marketplace on related instruments, related venues, etc. And then the third, which is a little bit more specific to digital assets, but it builds on that same kind of holistic theme, which is, and we announced at the end of last year a partnership called Project 10, which is a partnership with TRM Labs and Nota Bene, and it's really an intention to build that one-stop shop, single pane of glass for digital assets across both on-chain and off-chain. So building that full spectrum of workflow and insights, across surveillance, across AML, across KYC, etc. And we'll continue to build that out in partnership with them and in partnership with the other providers in that space as we go forwards. And then all of that's really underpinned by just ensuring that clients continue to have the most optionality and flexibility in terms of how they engage with us and how they extract the most value from the platform. So all of those kind of standard software as a service experiences that you expect around being able to engage with the team, being able to access good quality data information from a knowledge base, being able to understand what the roadmap is and what new features we're rolling out and when and everything else, so that they really have that. And that's really back to our commitment about transparency. They understand exactly where everything is in terms of features, requests, deliveries, all in a way that's, if they want it to be self-serviceable, but if not, supported by, as we talked about, a very strong team of market practitioners that can support them.
I think there's a really, all of those are fascinating. That digital asset space is one where there's so much potential growth, isn't there, as well, where we see, a marketplace that's grown and grown and grown, generally become, what I would call a mainstream asset class, or certainly heading towards that. But one where you're also likely to see a hell of a lot more regulation come into. We're already seeing news of that all the time, right? And that just shows that where I think the potential of you are and where it can grow to is just a pinprick at the moment. I mean, that's so exciting, right? That's got to be an area there where people are seeing significant amounts of growth for Eventus to grow into.
Yeah, it's absolutely. It's a really interesting part of the business. And again, if I'm honest, it's one of the reasons I joined. And yes, most recently, obviously, you've got things like EU coming out with MiCA, the Markets and Crypto Assets Directive. Obviously, most recently, Biden's executive order that really starts to provide some of that regulatory clarity or insight on how people are thinking about these things, that then translates into much more of the wider institutional adoption, which is still at its early days. And I think that goes back to your point around, the potential here is still, when you think about it from a market cap perspective, the potential here is still huge. And there's a lot of investment going into that space, as well as a lot of investment in those providers in terms of breaching over to some of the more traditional finance space as well, and some of that interest in more of the derivative space, etc. So it's going to be really interesting to see over the next couple of years how those two spaces continue to where they continue to converge and where they continue to differentiate. There's probably some consolidation due at some point across some of these providers, and I think that goes back to that future-proofing piece around being able to rapidly react to changes in market structure as much as regulation itself. So yeah, it's a space we're heavily invested in and continue to work very closely with all of the different stakeholders in that space across the platform providers, the intermediaries, etc.
That's always been a sort of, from again outside looking in, a sort of core theme of it, that those sort of partnerships and working out where relationships are. I've spoken to Travis at numerous different stages about that sort of collaborative element of how the market looks at the moment. This isn't just a one size fits all. This is about putting and piecing together those core partnerships. Is that something which you sort of keep very much at the core of the DNA of the business? Is that how you see the future sort of developing out partnerships and bringing in the right skill sets and the right companies at the right time for your customers?
Definitely. Actually it's a really good question, because that is key, I think, in terms of our longer term plans. As we continue to build out more of a mature kind of RESTful based API layer on top of the platform, as we continue to work with our partners, this is both in digital and traditional finance. I think it's key that as well as having our core capabilities, we can extend those capabilities through those third parties, so that from a client perspective, it really is a single workflow and a single tool, albeit behind the scenes it may be actually there may be data being aggregated and brought in from multiple different third-party partners, etc. And yes, we're seeing that particularly in the digital asset space. In a lot of the traditional finance space, people often for sort of elect for best of breed across their different platform providers. With the digital asset guys, we're seeing much more looking for that single pane of glass across all of those different capabilities, and being able, as I say, being able to bring that together in a single workflow. But I expect that to that's one of the things that I expect to move over to traditional finance over time as well. And I think important that we continue to have those partnerships and we're able to extend out into those, what we would consider non-core areas for us, but from a client perspective is important. And as I say, accessible through that single workflow. And obviously there's technologies and tools out there that also really help to provide that as a single user experience.
There's definitely that ambition, isn't there? As you see, I've spoken about this a lot on the show in recent months, about the sort of digital world in our day-to-day lives, just how ease of use and expectation and how we utilize our technology. And I think that it's taken a while actually for the capital markets to catch up with that in quite the same way. And actually now, when people are seeing that sort of that sort of benefit, the expectations are there to have that sort of single source of and be hyper personalized to what they want to see and how they work it. And I think you're right that obviously that digital world digital assets world has probably raced ahead of it a little bit. But my view is the appetite is and what we're seeing is a heavily growing momentum about having that sort of multi-layered partnership approach to getting the best possible solution, removing friction, increasing ease and speed, reducing costs to an extent as well. And I think that's a really interesting sort of conundrum for legacy businesses to work out how they either adapt and join that partnership world or be eaten effectively, would be my view of the world.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Apple versus Google thing, isn't it? And don't get me wrong, Apple have built an amazing business with a very walled garden and very controlled ecosystem. And there's obviously challenges when you look at the Google Android side of things in terms of some of the fragmentation, etc. that happens. So that middle ground, I think, is key and very important to be able to ensure that there's that you have the right sort of onboarding and touch points and integrations, that it's there's a quality workflow at the end of it for the user, but not having to protect your ecosystem in a way that means that you use it as a barrier to entry. I think we see the opposite, which is being able to have those integration points and those partnerships and that ability to complement, the core data that we have in Validus with additional sources or additional functionalities as a key to the longer term strategy of the offering. Yeah.
So let's move on to that longer term. Talk to us about what's next. I mean, we've I know we've been touching on that all the way through this so far, but as going all the way back to what I first said about that sort of hugely impressive start of year fan parade of everything that happened across Eventus over the course of 2021. And as I say, I felt so compelled to watch it. I recorded it, and I watched it again the other day, just as we were finishing our quarter, about some of the sort of statistics and everything that was going there. I found it really inspirational. Talk to us about what we can expect to see at the end of 2022, because we've the Financial Technologist, we highlighted Eventus yet again as one of the companies to watch, most influential FinTech firms of 2022. What's in store for us? What can we expect to see?
I think we've touched on a lot of it already, which is particularly that holistic surveillance piece. So whether that be behavioral analytics and statistical analytics, how's this trader performing versus how they normally trade, ADV, etc. As well as then the cross-product and cross-market surveillance. So how is the relationship between these different types of products impacting the behaviors in the market and the manipulation, etc. So that's key, and that's a big focus for us this year, and that sees investment in terms of data, in terms of continued asset class coverage, continued kind of surveillance coverage in terms of what we call procedures, but new ways to look for market manipulation, etc. So that's going to be a key focus area across this year. And then overlaid with that, the continued expansion of our go-to-market teams across the different regions. So we've got those regional experts to remain focused on delivering for our clients, making sure they extract the most value and continuing to align the business with the different regions and the different challenges that exist in each of those regions. And then continuing to build out the platform and its capabilities. So, we really think of Validus as a financial risk platform. And as we continue to evolve the API offering, as we continue to build on that marketplace piece, and we continue to enhance a lot of our ability to bring in data, particularly directly from exchanges. We can already connect to more than 30 or 40 exchanges directly. And as we continue to expand that, we're really able to work with clients in terms of bringing all of their flow together and consolidating all of that flow into a single, well-normalized platform, accessible either by front end or via API, for them to do all of their risk analysis, calculations, etc. And as I say, whether that's done directly by us or by the marketplace and integrations, that will evolve over time. So that's where we're heading, and I think we'll make significant strides there over the course of the rest of this year.
No doubt about that whatsoever. It's just such an inspiring story to listen to, and what's probably even more exciting from everything we've spoken about so far is it's very much still the start of the journey, isn't it? There's amazing scope and scale to see what's happening, and I've got there's a proven track record about where it looks like it's heading after that as well. So really, really exciting to watch it, and really excited to see the growth of the business moving further forward. And Ollie, what I can also say is it's great to see someone who's gone into a job over 6 months and seems to be really settled into an environment, really happy and really excited about the challenge. You're someone there who's clearly enjoying himself at the moment.
Yes, definitely. It's good fun. A great team. And to your point, it's just that sort of pivotal. You can look back and see the success, but you can look forward and see the opportunity, and that's a great, that's a great place to be, particularly for someone in my role from a product perspective. So very excited about what's still to come.
So there's going to be questions where people want to find out a little bit more about this, Ollie, and hear about the Eventus story, maybe even want to get involved in it. What's the best place to get hold of you?
Happy for people to get in touch. Keen to hear thoughts, feedback, ideas, and share more where we're heading. People can just email me at Ollie, OLLIE, @eventus.com, or get us through the website. Always happy to engage and always happy to get feedback and thoughts.
Fantastic. Ollie, it's been great. I always love having you on the show. It's been brilliant talking to you again. Great to hear more of the Eventus story, and thanks for joining us today. Really enjoyed it.
It's been great to be back. Thanks for having me. Look forward to the next one.
Likewise. Well, I'm sure it's not going to be too far off. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you soon on another episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.